First of all, welcome to everyone who's here. Thank you for coming. Hope the odd being in the middle of the month didn't put everybody off or anyone off. We couldn't make it earlier. Unfortunately, Gary can't join us tonight. He's got some things he's dealing with personally, so he'll be around at the next one, I think. So it's just me holding the fort tonight. So if anything goes wrong, I'm the one to blame. So we've got the news as usual. We'll kick off with that. Then I was just gonna briefly mention adding a natural language search using an add-on, which was presented by Cris the other day. Just to kick off the idea about AI. I've also got a shame Michael's not here because he proposed he pushed the next thing in our way, which is about building web portals in something called Five. So there'll be about a half-hour presentation on that. And then Cris Ippolite is going to talk about AI deployed. He's going to join us for half an hour to an hour. And Ian is going to talk about using FileMaker with AI models. And then we've got the virtual bar, and at which point, if we haven't already got to it, we'll do your interest in introducing EAB models to guys. So let's kick off with the news. Okay, I'm going to just present this screen. Oh, Cris says there's a late breaking bit of news. Do you want to talk about it, Cris, or do you want me to talk about it? Do you want to put it in the chat?
Do you have it in the deck? Yeah, I have it in the chat, but
okay, let's have a quick look at that. Okay. I lost trust while the OpenAI team in charge of safeguarding humanity imploded. Okay.
Sounds ominous, doesn't it?
It is pretty ominous, yeah. That is an interesting one to look at.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name, Jan Leike, did a series of posts on Twitter, I think today, saying that over the past few months, his team has been sailing against the wind and they were struggling to get access to compute resources and they couldn't get any of their research done. And they finally just threw in the towel and they're leaving. The guardrails of OpenAI's product is out the door.
That is a big one. I think that trumps anything I've got to talk about. But that's important. That article's in the link is in the chat to anyone who wants to go and look at that. Thank you for bringing me that, Cris. That's really helpful. So briefly going through the news, which Gary and his associates kindly prepared for me. So this is kind of the first time I've seen much of it as well. The Cris Engage 2024 session recordings appear to be out for anyone who's interested in those. I think there were some great presentations there. I haven't had time to look at many. I don't know if anyone else has. But go explore. I can, if anyone's interested, just ask me and I'll put the link in the chat. There is a server security update from Cris, which you should definitely pay attention to. That's been fixed in server 20.3.2 and 19.6.4. Definitely something to make sure you're up to date with.
So I chatted with Alexei about this, and he said he is putting up a website. I don't know if it's going to be a blog or what, but he is in the process of writing a scanning tool basically to see if whatever server setup you have has this vulnerability. And he'll be publishing that on the website. So I have no idea what his timeline is or when he thinks he'll have this up, but I would imagine the next month or two. And
Okay, that would be good.
when
I'll-
that
I'll
happens,
try-
that would go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
I was just going to say, whenever that happens, that might warrant a mention in your future news announcements.
Definitely. I will keep an eye on that, and I'll put it in here, and I'll also put it on the FMBug website as soon as I come across it. Definitely. That would be really interesting. An issue with related data. This is affecting Windows clients on Pro, not showing all the data in the portals. I don't know if anyone's come across anything in that or had this issue. It looks like it's still ongoing in 19 anyway. Yes, I don't know whether that's in 20 as well or not. Oh yes, there's a comment, sorry, about the thing that Chris was talking about, saying he's developing a reverse proxy for FM server. That's in the chat. Yeah, keep an eye on the chat, everyone. There's some interesting comments in there. The Soliant have produced a whole series on blogs on scaling FileMaker, which has been very interesting reading. Well worth a look. They're up to part 5 now, I believe. So many thanks to the guys at Soliant for making that available to us all. And helping with, particularly with large systems. I know there's some people here would definitely be interested in that, in resolving the slowdowns. On window transaction JSON, there is a whole article on that. So if you go to that link there, that one I will post in there because it's much more than I'm going to say. It's quite a long article. Well, it's not a particularly long article. It's a very interesting article about improving the performance of storing found sets using JSON. And it looks particularly interesting. And that's it for my list of news, I think. Anyone want to come back about any of those things or throw their 5 pence worth in or whatever currency you work in? Or anyone got any other news they want to share?
Hey, I'll throw in one thing. For what it's worth, the updates, at least in 19.6.4, is not directly downloadable from the FileMaker update website. It's not visible there. It is the emails that go out from orders@claris.com is where we were able for a number of clients to find the download links for 19.6.4.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's a good one.
They're keeping that one a little hidden.
Maybe that'll make it more commonly available in due course.
I guess another news item is Apple has announced new hardware, including the M4 iPads, which should make for speedy FileMaker Go clients if you wanted to use them for that.
Oh yes, I saw that announcement yesterday. Was it, when did they make it yesterday? Or was it just
When did they do that? I thought they did that on the 7th.
Oh, it may have been a bit before. I think I picked it up yesterday. But yeah, performance can be a little bit underwhelming on the current range of iPads. So that should improve that quite a lot. No, well, we can always carry on any discussions in the virtual bar. I will stop sharing that. I will move on to the next item, which is, oh yes, adding a natural language search to your solution. So, Claris did a presentation the other day about adding a natural language search to your solution. I'm just going to see if I can find where I put that. Produced by Ippolite Applications. I hope I got that right, Jonathan Nicoletti. And it's pretty easy. I'm sure it's something we're always being asked for is a national language search, or if we're not being asked for it, I can see use for it in terms of people not entering data correctly, or users not entering searches properly because they're not quite sure what they're searching for. So I think it's got huge potentials. I had a quick look at it. It's okay at the moment, but I did a very basic test, which I'll show you. It took me about 7 or 8 minutes to do it total. That was from including downloading the add-on. So if I share my screen again, so that was this one. So it's an add-on that's produced as part of something called Wolfpack, but you can, if you go to this link, get it directly, and it's a slightly updated version. That's my chat gone. I will put this link in the chat. I have got so many windows open here, it's hard to see. I'll put it in the chat afterwards. And basically all you need to do is download the add-on, put it in a particular location, which is in, the instructions are fairly freely available in Claris. So if anyone doesn't know how to put in an add-on, check Claris help pages for that. It's pretty easy. And then I'm going to go to this other screen. That's the live one. Yeah. Okay, so once you've downloaded your add-on and put it in the right folder, which is in your library inside the FileMaker folder somewhere, I can't remember off the top of my head, you will have in your add-ons, not this, but you'll have a little plus button down here, which you press, and I will do it with another one. You pick the add-on that you want to add. So all the add-ons that you've downloaded will be in here. And you just click choose, and bingo, it adds it to your add-ons menu. Then you just drag it onto your layout. And you can fiddle around with it, make it a decent size. Pretty much like a button, you can change the size of it, you can change its characteristics. So you can have the button icon changing. If you wanted that in white, for example, you could do that. And you can change where this is. It's basically a popover. So you can have it going the other way. You can change the size of the popover, whatever you want on it. I'm not doing this very beautifully, but here you go. And there's a configure button for it, which is an improvement on the earlier version. So I'm going to pop back into browse mode. And okay, we're going to do a, you need to configure it first. So what do you need? You need an API key for OpenAI, which, given what Cris said, will be interesting to see how this goes earlier. And your AI key goes in there. If you want to know where to get an AI key from, go to the OpenAI site. You have to sign up. And once you signed up, you'll get a dashboard, which has got all sorts of things like this, including an AI key, and you just press create a new key. You'll be given a default project. And you'll be charged accordingly, but it's not very expensive for each API call, because this this natural language search works by making an API call. There's an idea of the pricing. I'm not going to spend time going through it all, because we've got some other stuff to do. But you can see it's not too bad. And there's a reference guide. Whilst I'm here, this is where you get the add-ons from, just from Claris Marketplace, for those who don't know. And that's just telling you what you need. And there are instructions if you get stuck on this website, which I will post up. So, okay, I will copy that one in a minute. Let's just start with something really easy. Let's start with last name is begins with S. See what it does. There you go. It's 1,000 records of just dummy data. It's just a data file with some sample data in it. You can see it's found lots of last names which are beginning with S. I think it should have not found the ones which are in that list. So it looks like it's not entirely useful. Another search I did was last name starts with C in the Northwest. So you could do this. I mean, this is a very simple layout, but you could do this with traditional finds. The blog tells you a few reasons why you might not want to, and why this might be an advantage. To my mind, it's very early and at this stage a bit of a gimmick, but I can see some potential in it. And as you can see, it's really easy to do. Any questions? Comments? Anyone think they might be interested in using it?
My only suggestion would be to have a look at the Cris FileMaker backlog.
Yeah.
Because they mention a couple of things that are quite similar.
Okay. Yeah, I just picked this out because I happened to watch the presentation, so I thought I'd have a look and see what was happening in the general in Paris encouraging the rest of the world to use AI movement. But if someone wants to play with it, it's there. It's quick and easy. So I will stop sharing that. I will put that in the chat link. So that link's in there. Right. Moving on. I'm going to actually, this presentation is a video because the guys are in Australia. So it's not in our time zone. It's a nightmare trying to contact Australia, as I'm sure half of you know. I will see if I can find where I've put the video. Where did I put it? Hopefully this will work.
Okay, hello and welcome everyone. Let me start off by quickly introducing myself. I am Prinoy. I'm a developer advocate here at File. And now with today's video, my aim is to show everyone what exactly Five is so that everyone is accustomed to what exactly Five is, what kind of applications we can build with Five. And lastly, I want to highlight how we can connect an already existing FileMaker application to Five using FileMaker's data API and quickly deploy those applications onto the web. Now, on your screen, you can see that currently I'm running Five directly onto the browser. You can see I'm running it on Chrome. And now when we run Five, this is the first page that we see. Now the question is, how do I get started from here? How do I get started building my first app inside Five? Now, in order to get started, what you can do is just on top, you can see that we have this tab called as applications. If you click on that, then you get this interface where you can go and manage and start building on the application that you've already built. So you can see I have a list of all my projects here, or we can start by creating a new project. So let's create a new one by clicking on Add Item. And now Five is asking me for a title for my new application. So just for the sake of this video, let's just call it FileMaker 10. Okay. So once I have actually given my application a title, Five will automatically give it an ID. And now what I can do is I can click on Save just right over here. And now once my application is done saving, it'll appear here on this list. And now once it's actually done saving, you can see now I get access to this blue Manage button. Now, if I click on that Manage button, now then Five will actually transport me into the development environment of that application. But before actually going into the development environment and start building this application, let us quickly preview what kind of application Five gives us straight out of the box. So in order to do that, I want to quickly run my application, and we can do that by selecting our app. So we have already selected FileMaker demo. And then you see that we have this button here called as deploy to development. Now, when I click on that, you can see now Five is actually starting deploying the application. Now, what that means is now throughout this video, we won't be actually running our applications locally. We will be actually directly deploying them onto the web with their own unique domain and working directly on top of that. Okay, so now you can see once my application has done deploying, my cloud button, deploy developer button will change and it will actually turn into these three buttons, which says run your application. In order to preview it, run with a debugger or the inspector, as we like to call it, and just remove it from development. So let's quickly run the application and see what kind of application Five gives us straight out of the box. Okay, so now you can see this is the current state of our application. So you can see it's a complete blank canvas. And we only get a header bar on top by default, which has some custom features. It has an avatar icon, a bell icon for notifications, hamburger, some arrows, and a breadcrumb. But apart from that, you can see it's a complete blank application. And as you can see, our application is currently running on its own unique domain. So that means, again, reiterating, we're not running it locally. We'll actually be deploying it onto the cloud every time we click on run. Okay, so let me just delete that tab. And now let's click on the blue manage button to get into the development environment. Now, when I click on the blue manage button, now, as I said before, Five transposed me into the development environment of the application. So currently you can see on top, I have a bunch of menus. I have visual, logic, data, task, setup, and tools. Now, what basically Five does is it separates all of its pre-built components and its features into these various layers. Now, for example, if I click on visual, I have the options to create forms, charts, dashboards, reports, menus, etc. Similarly, if I click on data, I have the option to basically push tables into my database, write SQL queries, connect my application to any REST API, and a lot of other things. Now, in order to get started building my application, there's a lot of things I can do. I can start defining my databases. I can connect to an external database. But currently, for our current use case, what we're going to do is we want to quickly connect this app to an existing FileMaker application using the FileMaker data API. Now, in order to do that, what we can do is we can click on data. And as I highlighted earlier, we can click on the connection wizard to quickly start connecting an application to an API. Now, I can see from this interface, what this interface is basically expecting me to do is that it's asking me to provide a URL over here, an endpoint, which is a simple GET request. Then on top, if I click on create single here, it expects a endpoint for a post request. Similarly, our put or patch, then delete. Now this looks a little confusing. Let me clarify it by actually using our API. Okay, so with me, I actually have an API of a FileMaker application. So let me paste that. Okay, so bam. Now you can see this is the convention of any FileMaker data API. We are currently inside file FMI, then data, then we latest to get the latest databases. Then we are inside a database called as MM5. And then we are simply asking that database to give us details of some students. Now, if you're already aware with how FileMaker API works, is that it usually requires a bearer token in order to transfer some responses. Now you can already see we have provided a bearer token already for this one. So let's click on send. And let me quickly click back on params. And bam, now you can see that we get the entire response from our API right over here inside Five in a JSON response. So you can see now this API has returned 150 total students. And you can see we have a database MM5 layout API students and the table is for students. And bam, you can see that I have all of my students with their name, their email, their year level, which campus they are from, their record ID, and their node ID. So you can see I have all the details right over here. Now, one thing that Five does is that apart from just showing you information for your API, what it also does is it also tries to understand what kind of information is being sent from your API. Now, what I mean by that is you can see over here, I have a tab called as field mapping. If I click on that, now you can see here Five is actually trying to translate all of the individual fields from the API into individual fields inside Five. So you can see here it's mapping ID students into its own unique field called as ID student as well. And since it's mapping every single field, it's also giving them their own data type and a display type as well. Okay, now one more thing, since it's actually mapping fields as well, again, one thing that we have to do over here is that we have to provide a primary key for over here. So since we have to provide a primary key, we actually kind of lucky because FileMaker already gives us this sort of primary key called as record ID. Now, if I just click on that, and we are good to go. Now what I'll do is I'll quickly copy this URL, and now I'll click on read single mapping. Now, basically what read single mapping is that it expects the exact same endpoint that you provide over read list mapping, which is the endpoint which fetches all of your records from a layout. But instead, in read single mapping, here, what read single mapping is trying to do is that instead of actually getting all of your records from an API, it's just trying to focus on a single record at a time. So here, what you can do is just over the end of your URL, provide the variable for your primary key. Now, our primary keys are record ID. So let's just type record ID over here. Now, this works in such a way that now, since this is a variable, you can provide the record ID over here. And then when you click on send, it should only fetch the response of that particular item belonging to that record ID. So let's quickly test this. Okay, first we need to get our bearer token back. So let's click on read list mapping. Let me just quickly copy that bearer token. Let's put that in here. Okay, so now that we have put in our bearer token, now what I want to do is I want to go to params, and I want to quickly specify a record ID over here. So I've copied a record ID earlier. Let me just quickly paste that. And now let's click on send. And now I should be getting the record of the student with that exact same ID. There you go. And that's the only response I get. So just for the today's video, I'm just going to quickly just put in these two values, which is read list mapping and read single mapping, just for a quick example. What I'll do is I click on general, and people who have already worked with the FileMaker data API might have one question, that the bearer token for any file API usually expires every minutes. So even though if I have an application that is talking to my API, what to do if my bearer token expires at 15 minutes? Application is just not able to talk to my API anymore. Okay, so in order to, we have actually inside 5, what you can do is once you have done setting up your API, you're inside the connection wizard. Click on general and provide these basic details for you. So since we are creating a new API, we'll call it service. Let's give it an ID. I'll call it the name is students because we information is from students. Firstly, we need to give it an authentication type. So now FileMaker, we'll give it the basic authentication type. Username and password, we can provide the password for basically your. And then on your password, we can provide the credentials. So I'll quickly do that. So I just quickly pasted the username. But so your token endpoint usually resides in like this. Now, people who have already used data API be 100% aware of this. But just in case I want to mention this, that your token endpoint usually resides over in this URL. When your database, you select your layout, your database, and then you provide sessions. Inside sessions, your token usually inside response. Dot. And now 5 has your the credentials of authentication. It also has the end path for your token. It can regenerate when it's about to expire, and then application would seamlessly be able to talk to your data without worrying about the bearer token. Okay, so once I'm actually done with all, let's click on save. And now once I'm done saving it, now API is saved as it was in my application, and now I can where inside platform. Now the question arises is, since my API is stored as in my applications, now there are a lot of things that I can do inside File. And now a data source can be thing from a table to an SQL to an external database and API. Now, for example, say that I want to quickly build a form acts on top of our API. Do is, let's click on visual. The fastest way to create forms inside File form visit. Let's click on the form visit. Here, as you can see, it's asking. Now, in our application, we already have only one data source, which is our students. Let's click on that. And now, once I actually click on that, File automatically fills in most of my information. Over here, it gives my form a name, a pattern application, and even gives it a caption for a menu item. So now let's click on next, click on this arrow button. And now you can see from our API, if I will actually put that in front of us, and it gives all of it, the fields, their own caption, their type as well. Over here, I don't have to actually do, I can maybe put the name, put on a list maybe. And then I can just save. I don't have to mess around with anything over here. Okay, so I've added my API, quickly made a form with just a 2 simple. Now, quickly review the application again and see how these 2 changes have impacted user application. Now, if you remember earlier, we had blank canvas. Now we actually do have a photo first, along with a menu left which says students, which is the name of the form. Now you can see from our API, this is actually fetching in all of the students, names, and their name. Now, if I click on it, the back all of its details, let's click on the edit button. Now, all of that details from our API here in a form. Okay, so just by a couple of clicks, we were to add a form on our app, which is running onto the web, which is talking directly to our FileMaker API for the students from our FileMaker application over here. Now, one thing I usually like to highlight is that that 5 creates web application. It creates responsive web applications. And what is that by default, with creating a single piece of code, your applications will be responsive to any string set. So for example, let me quickly shrink this background. Let me quickly shrink this to a small size. And bam, now you can see as I my browser, you can see now it actually converts into full pictures. Let me shrink it a little bit more. And you can see that our application will be responsive. And now, basically now we get a mobile view. So we get full page layouts. Our hamburger menu are actually shown our forms. We click on exit. And now we get a list like this. Yeah, let's go back to the development in what. Let us talk about what else we can do with our data source. Let's say that I have a form. Now let's have quickly build a dashboard, which actually is some charts and some information from my. Okay, so in order to make a dashboard, reiterating what I need 2 charts on my dashboards and code down on the board. So let's say that. So my first step to create code would be to make my charts. Charts can be made inside 5, on visual, and then simply bring the chart visible. Okay, so here in this interface, let us start by giving our chart title. So let our students chart. And then in the data source, let our students. Now we get all of our from API right over here. So we are free to make our chart in the X value column. Let me select the name each students. So we have the name of all of them. So as you have noticed before, we are data of each students. In order to make a meaningful chart, what I can do is the name on the x-axis, y-axis. Let's just quickly see the year level. So now I have my students and which year they belong in. Example, that Dennis belongs to year, and then belongs to years 11. Okay, so let's give it an area. So I'll call it year level. Let's give it title level. We can choose to display on the top. And then we have this lookup, which we can change which kind of graph it is from line, pie, dot, and various. Yeah. What I'll do is I'll select a color and give it one, let's say. And now we have a chart of blue color. Let's click on save. We are done with the first chart. Now let's start building our second chart. Now, since we are building 2 charts for a dashboard, I have quickly connected this app to another source called as products. So instead of students, this API simply returns us a list of, so you can see we have iPhone, iPhone 10, Samsung, Oppo. So it gives the list of products, the amount of stock we have, the various the details that we have. Okay, so for this in the expert, let us select the title for each product. So of the product site over here, and the column, let's say the discount. So we have all the discount percentage each products right over here. Now we have this kind of a data, we can turn our chart bar to a radar. So radar chart right over here. All right, so let's give a title. So I can call it my discount. Let's give it an area. I can call it discount. And let's also choose to title called as discount on top as well. And bam, I don't have to do any other changes over here. I can simply click on save. And I am done with this chart as well. Okay, so now since we have both ready, now let's quickly talk about how we find them into a dashboard. So visual, and then we have this option here called in the dashboard, adding a new item. Let's give it a title. Since the word, I'll just simply call it a dashboard for now. Now, a dashboard's basic like a grid. For example, that you can specify the number of columns and the number over here. So for example, if I specify columns and 2 rows, then our dashboard will be split into 4 cells on the top and 2 cells right on the bottom. So basically, I'll be able to place on the top left or the top right or bottom left on the bottom. So based on the amount of the rows you specified, you can basically it will split itself into it mimicking that. Well, for example, now I specified 2 column rows. So what I can do is I can click on actions. And now I can simply start actions into this dashboard. Add a new action by clicking on this add button. On top, I would like both of my. So let's click on page position. Let's select. Now, as you can see, we have 2 columns. So you can see it splits itself into 4, 1, B1, A2, B2. So on. Let's select one. Let's select Mr. So on B1, let's select the discount. And lastly, I said I would like a report which shows me all of the students. So what I can do now, I can select A2, just select a form. Now, since form is the only item at bottom row, so automatically expand to both A2 and B2 cells, and it will take this entire space. But if you paste another here, then it will automatically collapse and will only take this much length. Since it's the only item, it will expand to A and B2. One last thing that I can make over here. I don't want to display that right. Let's reverse. And now let's quickly put this dashboard in our app so we can actually view it. So I click on it and then menus. And as you can see, I have an item called as dashboard over here. Okay, let's create a new item. So basically, we create a new item through which when we click on that menu item, it will display that dashboard in our end user app for us. So we'll just call that menu item dash as well. Let's create a menu order of true and this dashboard. So once it's let, so basically whenever we click on this, it will show us this action. On save. And let's. Now, as you can see, I have a new menu item called as dash. So if I click on that, I get my dashboard right here in front of me. I have my bar chart and my radar chart. Search bar over here and from here, which shows me all of my students' ID and their name. And if I click them, it should show me individual details as well. Your forms, so you're not limited, sorry, so you're not only limited to these kind of people. If I go back into 5, and if I click on visual, you can see that we can also build PDF report. So let me quickly show you. So okay, let's add item. Okay. So now for this report, let us giving it a title. Before a title, first thing my report was a data source. Again, data source, let's click on add source. Now again, you can see, you can connect our API that this PDF as well, which is called students. So let me quickly connect this report to FileMaker API called as students. Let's click on save. I'll go back to, let's go to title. I'll put students report. And now if I template, where I just click to add, it opens up this visual editor, which is familiar visual editor, because you have all of these formatting tops, which you can actually start creating for your reports. You have this, you can add headers, footers, control the page or page breaks, and you can even insert this layout as well. One thing that I usually like to highlight over here, that just in case if you do not wish to write your reports through a editor and you want an absolute control over how your report should look like, then you can click on this button which says change, and then essentially you can convert this entire editor into pure HTML and CSS, to which you can have absolute control of how you want your reports to look like. Now, for example, I'm not really code, so I just make a really quick report. So I'll give a title. So let's give it a title around, let's say 24 pixels. Let's make it center aligned. I can call it my students report. Let's make it bold. I'm going to give it table. That's a 3 by 3. And I'm going to make this table reflect this data from our API. Now, how can I do that? Firstly, I'd like to connect this table to my type, and then on top of table on the first row, I would like to show all of my, and then the data respectively down at the bottom. So let's click on the headers first. And then let's click on head. Over here, it's asking for a data source. Here I can select my API. Firstly, I don't actually want my first, I want my headers, which are my captions. And now we can select which field from my I would like to put inside my table. So let's select the name full prefer. Let's select the email of each student. And maybe very young. Makes sense. Now apply them to the current cell, apply them cell-wise or row-wise. I'm going to select row. So now since I have all of my up, let's quickly click on insert. And bam, I have all of my headers right over here. Now let's start acting in the records over here. So let's click cell, simple edit, data source students. This time, instead of captions, we select records. Let's select the exact same fields. Rather than row-wise. But this will take help of a built-in function by file, which is called. Basically, this function will make, instead of just populating my table with a single record from our API, it actually entire API and populates entire table with each and every record. Pressing on insert, and now you can see it with the syntax, which it makes sure that API. So once I'm done with my report, let's click on save again. I should put right over here. Now let's attach my report to my end user application. I click on visual menus. Let's quickly add in another. We add a new menu item. I can simply code, give it a name, and then select report. Let's click on save and another application again. And bam, you can see I have my student, I have my dashboard. Now I have my PDF report, right? Application as well. So you can see it's generating pages because we have a lot of data API. And bam, I directly a PDF report, which fetches is all the students from our FileMaker app and directly send this PDF report in front of us. Reiterating, everything is currently running on browser. This app is also running on its own unique domain. And of course, from here, since it's all PDF viewer, you can download PDF as well, of course, and directly send print. Okay, so actually in a couple of, less than half an hour, we were able to make a CRUD application inside Pike, deploy it onto the web and connect that app to a FileMaker app in the FileMaker API. Now, a lot of things I can go through over here. Go on through how you can write your custom function. JavaScript as 5 allows you to write your own JavaScript and TypeScript inside 5. I could have gone through how you can connect to expenses. I could have gone through how you can set up your own inside 5. For now, I would like to wrap up. Hopefully you find video helpful and intuitive. Hopefully this video allowed you to get accustomed to you had a basic understanding of applications can be made with 5, how we can basically go through 5 to give 100 applications. Now, if you're interested in this and want to quickly give info, you can go to our website at https://5.co. So at 5.co, quickly sign up for free and get a 14-day trial for our cloud version. And just in case, if you do not want a 14-day, want to use it indefinitely, trial, you can download a local version of 5. Absolutely use it indefinitely as well. Okay, so thank you all very much. And I hope.
Well, it looks like that ended a little bit abruptly, but that wasn't me, I promise you. Just ran out of steam. I hope that was of interest to people. I'm not sure. It's the first time I've seen that, so I've had to think about it. Any comments from anyone? It was actually one of our group members who suggested that we show that presentation. It looks like it didn't wow anyone.
It took him a while to get around to explaining. I knew for a while that I was looking at somebody doing something with a FileMaker data API, but I wasn't quite clear on why or what it was leading up to.
Yes, I know what you mean, Ian. I should maybe have introduced it a little more strongly, saying it was for developing web apps based on the FileMaker API. I don't know. I don't know if it's any better than using FileMaker directly with WebDirect. I guess the jury's out on it. Have you got any other thoughts on it? Having seen it?
I'm really not sure.
No, nor am I. Well, it was one I wanted to bring to people's attention so that we could all think about it, and it's there if people need it. If people are finding it of interest. I guess that's what this is about. So that was meant to finish up, and we're pretty much bang on time. Wow, Cris is here. Cris, are you actually ready to introduce your talk? Or to go ahead with your talk?
Sure am.
Feel free to
All right.
jump in there.
Well, first of all, thank you everyone for can you guys see my first intro slide? It says AI deployed real world. Okay, great. Thank you so much for that.
Yep.
And thank you also for letting me come and speak with you today. I appreciate the opportunity, and I very much enjoyed talking to folks in the Claris community about AI adjacent topics. I see some friendly names here on this call already. And really, there's a couple of things I wanted to bring everyone's attention to. And also I wanted to really have this be conversational as well too. I'm fascinated with how people are thinking about AI, what their concerns might be, or any of the thought process there. And I'm here to flag those. I'm sure Ian will be very useful for you guys too in the session, in the block that follows mine on the same topic. And so in the absence of those things, there's a couple of things I really wanted to sort of kind of get into everybody's mind. The first of which are, well, actually, let me do this too, because I'm sure we'll get into discussions and then we'll hit the bottom of the hour. And I want to be very respectful for Ian and hand right over to him in the same manner that we just did here momentarily. There's a couple of things that I want to bring to people's attention. One of which is I just recently started a podcast with Matt Navarre, and our primary focus of the podcast is talking about AI in the context of Claris. It's actually called Claris Talk AI, and you can find it at your wherever you get your finer podcasts. And a lot of what I talk about in these presentations is covered there in a thanks, Heidi, is in a more conversational form. So I urge everyone to check that out. That was absolutely done more to be able to convey concepts and training, and we compartmentalize a lot of those. So a lot about what we talk about in there is similar to what I generally do in the longer form version of this presentation. There is a long form version of this presentation also as part of one of the Engage, the US Engage recorded videos. So those of you that have access to it, I think mine was something with real world use cases in it. I've changed it to AI deployed since, but I urge you to go check it out. I was really happy with the way that came out. Oh, thank you. Thanks for posting that, Heidi. And then the last thing is where I'm attempting to get an initiative started about creating a open source knowledge base of FileMaker information that we can then create a language model, integrate with language models, and create endpoints for everyone in the world to be able to use, to be able to help learn FileMaker. And a lot of that has to do with sort of the topic that, one of the topics that I wanted to talk about here today, and that's the latent intelligence inside these, inside the language models themselves. So the first thing I think that is really, really important to come away with is that, let's just talk about, we got ChatGPT, we got Claude, we got Gemini now, there's all sorts of them, but I'll just throw those all into the same bucket as ChatGPT. Just the very first thing that I think is really, really important for Claire's folks like myself and everyone here needs to know is that it is not a database. It should not be looked at as a database. The opportunities for integrating AI should not be looked at as a database. And that comes with one important caveat. But let me just dig into the not a database thing first. And again, interrupt me at any time with any questions. I look forward to having dialogue on some of these points. But when you type something into ChatGPT, for example, it is not consuming that information for retrieval. It may, in fact, appear as though that is happening when you do that in a single conversation. That's the thread of dialogue that you're having, because there's this concept of conversational memory. So it's aware of what you had mentioned previous in the conversation, but it is not at all training the underlying model on the back end. The risk that this often comes up in the context of risk. People often talk about how the data that these things are trained on is in there somewhere. But what's happening, and I believe this is the most amazing and fantastic thing about what language models are actually doing. They're using training data to learn how to do things, like learn how to write a FileMaker script or a FileMaker calculation. They are not retrieving someone's FileMaker script or calculation and bringing it to you in a very advanced and amazing way. I think that's important to understand that in the landscape of what's actually happening, and also what we can actually use these things for. Because the tertiary part of that is that we should not look at the value of AI as it being a question answer machine. And if you're thinking about, oh, I want to, how can I include asking questions of the language model into my FileMaker applications, I am going to say some strong words that you're doing it wrong. There's really no value there to do that. And I think it's hopeful, because that's also where the blockers that people are perceiving are coming into play too. The perception of these blockers of we can't use language models because the answers aren't 100% true. My whole point is, who cares if you're not using it as a question answer machine? The thought experiment I would give FileMaker folks is look back on your entire career of all the FileMaker databases you've ever created, and how many times were you asked by your customers to actually include Google searching for the sake of answering questions into your apps? We know that that was one of the top things that's included in the web viewer configuration window, but I've never used it outside the classroom where I was just trying to bring the bar really low as to how we can incorporate web viewers into a layout before, but no one has ever asked me to do that in 28 years of building custom solutions. And I would go so far as to say that almost everyone, there's probably going to be a couple outliers, but almost everyone here can feel the same way. Well, that is not what we're talking about integrating language models into our applications. That is not why we're actually doing that. The reason that we're building these things in is to be able to provide our users with different ways that they can interact with data, different ways they can interact with content, and have that have the interactions come in conversational manner. That's really what we should take away from our own private experiences using ChatGPT. Like, for example, one of the things I'm showing you on screen here is what appears to be a ChatGPT interaction, but in fact, what it is exclusively with information that is coming from a specific API endpoint. None of the answers or data that you're seeing is actually being provided by the latent intelligence inside the language model that I'm communicating with. It's 100% of that is coming from the API. The combination of that is not only through these concepts called retrieval augmented generation. Let me just speak to that real quick as one of the big takeaways here. Let me actually show you, this is a good thought experiment. So first of all, let's say you went to one of these language models, like I'm just going to say ChatGPT for the sake of this conversation. Let's say you went to ChatGPT and you asked it, what is our vacation policy? Well, what information would you get back? I actually took what you see here in the upper left-hand corner is that's a older version of ChatGPT. You see Claude in the upper right-hand corner, and you see an older version of what is now Gemini in the bottom left-hand corner. All of them have these guardrails or instruction created in them to say, hey, we don't have your HR documents in our corpus of data, therefore we cannot answer that question faithfully. I'm showing that to you because we do have control over that. When we as developers are building AI integrated systems for our customers, we absolutely can say, hey, this is an HR assistant that we've created. Any questions that are not related to the context of the documents that we're pointing to or the database that we're pointing to with these answers, just respond to the user that these are outside the scope of what the purpose of this. That's exactly what they do with these with the ChatGPTs and the Claudes of the world too. The interesting thing is on the bottom right-hand corner, that's actually an open source model that's called Mistral. It's a little bit older version now, but it just came up with something that looks like an answer. This is what everybody talks about when they talk about hallucinations. Now, interestingly, on this view, this is an application that we created for one of our customers, and I asked the exact same question to Mistral, the exact same model, and now what I'm getting back is actually a very 100% truthful response to the question of, if you worked for this company, what would their vacation policy be? Regardless of what the actual vacation policy is, the point is that model that lied to us before and pretended it had an answer, which we could not rely on, we are able to control that as developers by giving it guardrails and instruction, and also pointing it to, in this case, the document that actually contained the correct answer. So this concept of having control over what truth we actually get out of these interactions is, I believe, a really, really important one for all of us to understand when we're evaluating the capabilities and the possibilities of integrating these models into our FileMaker applications or into our workflows. And the secret behind it is what this solution was doing was allowing users to pick specific documents that they wanted to chat over, and then going into that chat and having that conversation. You can build that into the back end. You can, present this workflow in various different manners. But the real takeaway that I wanted to get through in this discussion is that is actually what's happening or not happening behind the scenes as you're evaluating what's possible with AI. So I just wanted to just briefly, I'll take a sip for a moment and see if anybody has any thoughts on that before I proceed with some other items as well. I will operate under the assumption that makes sense and potentially was information that everybody knew already. And here's the last little magic trick as to how that's all working. The reason this works is because I'm not actually searching a language model for that answer at all. Never at any time do I ask a language model for that answer. I'm actually going, in this particular case, to a vector database. This is something that's going to come into the zeitgeist for FileMaker developers very soon, if you guys already haven't been talking about that. This was a semantic search. You can throw it under that category, where we did something where you vectorize these documents and you turn them into vector representations. There's a lot of really amazing things you can do when you do that beyond just search. But the thing that I think everyone should really focus in at least in their initial explorations, is the search capabilities. So in that case, we found answers that were relevant to the question, what is our vacation policy? So that means things like PTO, paid time off, parental leave, sick days, all those fall into the same category of vacation policy, for example, or time off, and therefore could potentially be candidates for answering this question. So we go beyond just keyword retrieval into this other type of retrieval. I could have also queried a FileMaker database for that answer, or a SQL source or done an API call to find the answer to this. The answer then comes back. Then I take the original question along with whatever answer or answers I deem are relevant. That is what we then send to the language model. And at that point, we are not asking the language model anything. We are telling the language model, here's the question the user asked, here's the answer to that question. You go turn that into reasonable language and text that a user can interact with. So it sounds like a human or seems like a human, or here's some additional guidance for how this user might find this information meaningful, so you can tailor the response to them. That's what we really want the language models to do. Speak like humans, process text, do things at scale that are completely impossible for a single human to do. Oh yeah, question. There we go. I'll pause for a moment. Go right ahead, please.
Oh, hi, Chris. This is Gianluca speaking from Italy. Just a question. So basically, the VectorDB is sort of a repository where you have all of the files that are related to the specific argument that you want to discuss with the customer. And it's sort of text that is contained inside the file, right? So how this...
It's sort of, yes, to some degree it is. It's beyond, it's more than OCR or optical character recognition. It actually extracts the meaning from the text and represents that meaning as well. And while you're clarifying, I'll bring up this graphic here just to illustrate that. But go ahead, please, with your question.
So I see that basically you use LLM such as ChatGPT or others just to expose the data to the customer, to the final user. But how do you speak with the vector database?
It's a great question. What vectors really are in the first place are, I got a couple slides here, but not to dig too far into it. They are numeric representations of the meaning of a word, a phrase, a paragraph, whatever it might be. This is an example of how every word, the thought experiment, by the way, I think this is something that we covered on the podcast. The thought experiment that I did once was I said to Matt Navarre, who's the co-host of the podcast, and we were talking about the same topic. And I said, Matt, I want to challenge you to take the word soccer, and I want you to tell me as many features of this word soccer, many descriptive features of the word soccer as you can as a human brain. And he rattled off, a handful of them. He did a really good job. He's like, says it's a ball, it's a sport, it's, various different things. It's round, it's black and white, and all those types of things. And then he kind of ran out of steam there. And what's interesting is these models, there are specific LLMs that are called embedding models that have the same power and reach of the language models themselves, because they frankly are those models that are derivative of those models, that can describe a word, a phrase, or a sentence, let's say, not only in the same amount of ways that a human can, but you see down here below the number 2, 300, and 4096. Some of these models can actually describe the features of something up to 4,000 plus different features. And so what that means is we're using the language models to go very, 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 very deep into what the meaning of a word is, or the meaning of a phrase is. And so what we're actually searching is it within that meaning. That's why I can say something like, what is our policy for time off? And I don't even have to say vacation, or I don't even have to say sick, or I don't have to say parental leave, but all of those will come back as answers, as potential answers to that question. I hope that makes sense when we're talking about searching.
Cris, how does data get into the vector database?
It's such an important question. It is, and I don't want to pretend by any means this is a non-trivial part of this, but you literally have to. Now, again, keep in mind, we're talking about documents, right? Like, so if you have PDFs that you normally would store in a FileMaker container field, for example, if you want to unlock the data that lives in those, instead of just being in the document and actually search within that document, you have to convert that document into these vectors. And that process is described as embeddings. And that's why I'll use these models called embeddings models. And you literally have to go through the process of, pulling levers to say, take this document and go turn it into numbers. And now those numbers are stored over here in this other vector store, in this other vector database. So you live in parallel. You have the documents in your FileMaker system and the documents over here in your vector store. So you will have to be conscious of, every time somebody updates this document, let's go get rid of the previous numeric representations and now go vectorize or, run this document through the embeddings process. so that it's refreshed. So we do have that overhead, and that's an important part of this. FileMaker will be lowering, or Cris will be lowering the bar on some of these steps soon, and I'm not going to steal from Ian at all. So I'm sure Ian will be able to explore that a little bit further at the top of the hour here with all of you. But it will be on your desktops very shortly, so you can explore this a little bit further. But a very important question, that doesn't just happen automatically. You have to send these documents through that process in order to be able to convert them, so to speak.
Right.
So even though I was using the example of a vector database, you could use your FileMaker database where you're searching to find what the real answer is. You could use a SQL database. You could use any database that you search on. You could do a query through an API. This step over here, where's my cursor? This step over here could be any interaction with the source of truth. If the source of truth happens to be documents, then go through the process of vectorizing them so you could search for the meaning within those documents and extract potentially meaningful answers to queries that users are asking. If it's a database query where you're saying how many events have we run that had more than 100 participants, you could just go search your database in the same way that you would query your database, and then take the chunk of answers back, send your how many events and your answers to the LLM to turn it into words, or to turn it into analysis or insights or visualizations or whatever it is that you want to do there as well. So it's not limited just to vector. Vector just happens to be one of the ways that you can unlock data that's previously trapped inside of documents, for example. But that can be incredibly useful. We have a customer that had a problem that they had these technical documents that were over 1,000 pages long, and they were so difficult for their customers to be able to find answers in, that their customers would have to reach out to them, where they would open a trouble ticket internally. So think of the overhead cost of this, to have someone read through the document on behalf of the customer and then answer them to close out the ticket. So instead, what we did is we just put a conversational AI interface in front of it. And now the users can just ask those questions and it'll find the answers within that document. So it's those types of things are the really low-hanging fruit from a where do we get started with AI type standpoint. Excellent. Okay, great. And again, that the process is called embedding. Oh, go ahead. Another question, please. Thank you.
Cris, is there any kind of example that is it possible to see in order to clear our minds?
Yeah, let me show you a couple, albeit I believe these are screenshots at the moment, but let me show you where these things can go beyond just simply answering a question. Like we looked at this one here where we were able to literally ask what's the vacation policy, and we see the answers that were within that document show up. But what are some other interesting things we can do when we have embedded data? For example, translations is a huge thing. First of all, language models can do translations very easily. We even saw a lot of these. If you guys had not yet watched OpenAI's presentation on their new GPT-4o or Omni, it's very much worth watching. It was pretty amazing what's happening there. One of the things they talked about was translation. One of the challenges, though, with translations in production is unless you speak both of the languages, you don't actually know whether your translation was any good, so to speak, right? So, for example, you see here I have this is red in one field, and then the Spanish translation of it, esto es rojo, in another field. Now, if you speak both Spanish and English, you can look at that and say, yeah, that was actually what the person was saying. But if you want to do this at scale, you have to have some way to actually do this sort of mathematically, so to speak. So what you can do is, so what's interesting is the vectorized meaning of a statement in the English language has the same similarity in the translated language, or has similarity if it was properly translated. So you notice these little percentages things that I have over here. All I've done is I've converted a similarity calculation, which is something that may be coming to a version of FileMaker near you, which just says in this overall, this crazy thing here, which is one of my favorite visuals, in this multi-dimensional space where we are plotting a word, you see the word soccer floating around in there? We're plotting the word soccer, and the distance it has to other words is how close in meaning they are to those other words. So to be able to measure the distance between these things in these vector spaces is very important. So for example, we see that soccer is closer to rugby than it is to American football. So we can say, okay, that means conceptually speaking, soccer is closer to rugby than football. And they mathematically, we would also have a value that is a longer distance value between soccer and American football than there would be between soccer and rugby, for example. So those distance values can be converted, or sometimes they look like percentages, but they can be converted to a value that we can use to do things like score a translation. So instead of just like randomly saying, here's a translation and then sending it out into production, one of the thought experiments I would do if you guys are exploring translation is go into one ChatGPT thread, put in a sentence or a paragraph of something and ask it to convert it to another language. Then in that same conversation, take the answer they gave you and ask it to convert it into English. And I think what you're going to find is almost always that it almost never translates exactly what you just said. It goes and it makes sort of an assumption of what you were trying to say and then converts that into another language. Now, that's not going to be ideal in production settings, for example. So being able to have another step where you vectorize the English phrase and you vectorize the response you got back from the language model and calculate the distance between them, that will determine whether or not you have to ask the language model to maybe translate that again with some other instructions, or if you can just say ship it and this one was good. So like here with this point, that's actually 0.92 similarity that I converted into percentages for the sake of the screenshot. That actually is meaningful in that it says this one is, so what we did is we actually use humans in the loop as well too. So in this case, we did 100 translations with a language model and asked Spanish speaking testers to give it a 5-star, to go in and say, yeah, this translation was good on a 1 to 5 scale or bad or whatever, right? And then we actually determined from that what an acceptable threshold would be. So we determined that it was about an 0.84 acceptable threshold of translation. So that means anything that's 84% or higher, the humans that have tested this at this customer are cool with those going into production. Anything below it, we would then go to the language model and say, please try again, or whatever the workflow is in that case. So absolutely, I would never do translations from language models without semantic scoring as a QA measure as well. Another fascinating example is the statement. This is something that I just did that was the statement of a potential customer making a statement about a need that they have, like I'm a busy professional, I need quick and healthy food option to fit my schedule, and then a company making a statement about a product or a service that they provide. You can actually determine the distance between those. So embeddings go beyond just simply meaning, but sometimes they also are, they can, like the answer to the question is one way to do it. The translation is one way to do it, or you can actually match using special types of embedding models, needs and solutions, which is really fascinating to me. So this is sort of like a recommender, like kind of way beyond the recommender systems that we're used to, for example. And then this is one that we just deployed, or actually, yeah, this week we just deployed. This is just a screenshot of it, but the production version is more complex. You can do the same thing to find the right applicant for a job. So one very brute force way to do this is you could take a bunch of job descriptions and a bunch of resumes and vectorize the job description, vectorize the resumes, and see how close in the semantic space they are. So it's not just words or phrases, but it can be an entire 1,000-word chunk of text that you can determine the meaning of and potentially match that way as well. So, and that one, by the way, we found out the way to do it was actually not embed the entire document because there's so much noise, but break the document into these like several different meaningful chunks of, not chunks, because that means something different, but several meaningful different extractions, and then go into the resume and then do this interesting step where we said, here's the resume. What would be the perfect job applicant for this resume? And let the language model determine that. And then we go into the resumes and say, here's the resume. What would be the perfect job position for this? Then we vectorize the ideals on each side and match them that way. And we found that even gave us even better ways to match these. And then finally, vectors. I know it looks like I just talked about vectors all day, but I think that's going to be a really important concept for all of us very soon in just a matter of days here. Another way to do it is just to be able to categorize. So you can say, here's a support ticket description and which one of these categories may have fallen under. So this is a categorization thing that we can do using vectors and similarity as well too. So, you know, I guess it turned out that I was really just talking about vectors today. Ian, I hope I didn't steal any of your thunder. My apologies. But this is a great way, I think, for people to start their journey understanding. If anything, the takeaway is this. These are not databases. Thinking of AI as a question answer machine is great for your, you know, as a consumer and your day-to-day tasks. And, you know, when you're just getting through the day, I do that all day long. I arguably have days where I'm doing it hundreds of times that I have to switch around so many different chatbots that they keep shutting me down and asking me to come back in a couple hours. I recognize the value. I'm saying as individuals like us who provide services to businesses, question answers are not a valuable service that businesses are looking for, nor will they. And frankly, they could probably just use ChatGPT if they wanted to anyways. The real value is in the way that language models can do things like support us in our embeddings endeavors, or that they can take non sequitur information, like a bunch of chunks of data that came back from a retrieval, and turn it into flowery, appropriate text that's finely tuned exactly for that specific person that's asking the question. And those are of tremendous value when, when it comes to evaluating these features from a business standpoint. So, so that's really the takeaway today. And I hope that's meaningful for everybody. And I hope this was useful. I'll also be, happy to answer any questions that we have at the last minute or so.
Yeah, I've got a question. Where do you see FileMaker fitting in that ecosystem? Is it almost like the familiar interface that helps us access it and control it, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit more esoteric than that. The language models have these incredible powers, but to really enact value for business, it needs data. And the amazing thing is everybody that's in the FileMaker space has been close to data, because that's literally the business that we're in. We're inside these buildings at these organizations that have already trusted us with the data. What I really think the value of the language models are, as far as integrating in with FileMaker, is a different way to get at the data that we already have, in the structure we already have, in the workflows that we already have, but allowing this other way for users to be able to extract even more meaning than ever, which is really kind of reinvigorating these data sets that we've had and been making available to users in ways that they previously just simply couldn't interact with. So to me, that I think that's probably the most profound opportunity that's ahead of us in the FileMaker space, really.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, a lot of companies have now amassed a huge amount of data, having used FileMaker for many years. So
exactly,
the validity perfectly. Yeah,
that's it. Trust me, I'll leave you guys with this. There are a ton of different AI startups out there right now that have a product or an idea or a use case that have nobody with data that they can exercise these tools with. And we are starting in the opposite way. We have tons of data with our customers, and we're just looking at different, more meaningful ways to do it. At the very least, just think of all those documents that you store in container fields that you can't actually search inside of. Now you can actually unlock all that data and expose it. At the very least, that it just gets a tremendous more amount of value to the existing systems that we already support without this functionality. So hopefully that's a thought-provoking. And with great respect, I'd like to hand over to Ian to take the baton of AI and bring this back into focus from a FileMaker standpoint. And thanks so much for letting me be part of this. And by the way, I'm happy to come back at any time. I have hours and hours of stuff. I can talk to you about different inputs, like image inputs and video inputs and image outputs and video outputs. I'd be happy to focus on those a little later.
That would be really great. And thank you very much.
Invite me anytime and I'll focus my presentations on just those aspects as well. Thanks,
great.
everyone. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Over to you, Ian.
Right. Now I've got to follow that up. Wow. Thank you. Okay, I don't have a I don't have a presentation as such. So what I'm going to be doing is going from showing you some stuff in FileMaker and a couple of other links. What I wanted to talk about was everyone's been talking about using OpenAI, Anthropic, the Google services, the hosted services for LLMs, and integrating with those. What I wanted to talk about was how can you use open source LLMs hosted locally on your computer, on your Macintosh, or inside your network. That means that you don't have to send your data to OpenAI or Anthropic. And so there's a number of reasons for that. Basically, we've got several trade-offs. We've got the reasons of data security, and I mean, well, actually, what you mentioned about two of the top people at OpenAI leaving because of their concerns. You know, this kind of stuff is, well, it is concerning. Anyway, what I'll do is I will share my screen, and which one's desktop one? There we are. Okay. What I'll do is I'll just start off in FileMaker. And actually following on from what Cris was talking about with embedding models. And I did actually demo this last time, but I'll show you really, really quickly that this is an example of how you can run models locally. So embedding models that Cris talked about can not only work on text in documents, but they can also work on images. So this file here, this FileMaker file basically has 25,000 images in it. And I've generated embeddings for those images, which means that we can search. So if I say search for car, that's found images of cars. If I search for, it finds images of London. And yeah, so they've got a variety of them. So and this is running locally. So I've got the FileMaker database is local, the images are local, and I'm running a local vector database. And
so you put those images into a vector database, basically.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I basically wrote my own API to the model. So if anybody cares to see Python code, you can see that basically the API, so we're calling this API from FileMaker. And if we go to query the embedding, what it'll do is it basically asks us which image we're looking at. It looks up the image, does the search, and I'm using, this is the query. I'm using Postgres as a vector database. Postgres has added vector embeddings recently. Most databases are, and as FileMaker say on their backlog, that FileMaker will be doing so fairly soon as well.
Are you using PG Vector?
That's correct. Yeah. So one of the nice things about PG Vector is you can actually do a SQL query to search for embeddings. And that's what the query looks like, that line right there.
You're not sharing your screen anymore.
I can see it.
Oh, I can.
No? It says I'm screen sharing.
It must be me. I don't know. Yeah, I can't see it anymore. That's weird. Never
Can
mind.
you see it? Can you see anything of my screen?
I can see all the people. I see everybody's little gallery pictures, but I don't see any screen sharing.
Okay. Can anyone else see it okay?
Sounds like
I can
everyone
see
else.
it.
Yeah, we can see it.
No worries.
Okay.
Carry on.
Okay. You'll probably be seeing this again in Berlin fairly soon anyway. So yeah, so this shows an example of how we can integrate to FileMaker. And so the model I've used is the clip VIT B32 model, which allows us to do text and images. So in this case, I've searched by word, but it can also show similar. So in that case, it will find images that it thinks are similar to the one that it's been looking at. And architecturally, I'll keep this really, really brief. What we're doing is we're basically from an image in FileMaker, we talk to the API, do a similarity search, which talks to the vector database, finds the closest matching vector, and then hands that back. And then the API basically hands back a list of record keys to FileMaker. And then given the list of record keys in FileMaker, it simply does a go to related record. So that's quite quick. And hopefully we'll be able to see some improvements on that, taking out the need to use Postgres in the future. Anyway, okay. Like I said, no presentation, so it's a little chaotic, but one of the other things we've got are with using hosted models are costs that we need to think about. And if we took the example where we had, say, 1,000 documents, if we're dealing with 1,000 documents a month that were about 1,500, you can view tokens as being roughly equivalent to words. They're kind of a representation of words. So if each document was, say, 1,500 words, and you're summarizing it to something that was, say, 500 words, this is kind of what your cost would be per month with different models. So with OpenAI, it's quite interesting that their newest best model is actually also their cheapest. But part of the reason they've done that is that Anthropic, with Opus, their best model is actually quite expensive. So you can see it's $75, 75. These prices are US dollars per million tokens. And then this is the cost calculation. So to do that at Anthropic would cost you $60 a month. And the other interesting thing is that as OpenAI update their models, some of the models that they're older models seem to get more expensive. So it's as if they're shoving you to change the newer models, because GPT-4 32K is actually quite an expensive model. It would cost you $150 a month to do 1,000 documents of that size to summarize them. So the interesting one here is Grok. And Grok have not built their own model. Grok hosts a model known as Llama 3. Llama 3 is the open source model that was open sourced by Meta and is available. People can host themselves, but Grok will host it for you. And you can see it's enormously cheaper than the other options. But if I go, where to start? Okay, let's start here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show a couple of examples. I'm just going to go through a really quick example of integrating with the models via the APIs. I'll show the code and talk about what the differences are. And I'm going to do it through ways. I'm going to talk to OpenAI, their APIs. I'm going to talk to the Grok Llama API. And then I'm going to talk to a local model that's running on my network on a Mac Mini that I've got here. And this will show you some of the trade-offs. But you can see in the case of OpenAI that we've got a large number of models we can choose from. And I'm just going to go with GPT 3.5 Turbo. Sorry, I've had a very long day. So if I run this on OpenAI, you can see, so it takes 3.3 seconds and we get, so essentially we basically assigned a system role where we're telling it what to do. Then the user role is the question we're actually asking. We're asking it to compose a poem that explains the concept of recursion in programming. And this is what it gives us back. So you can see we've got the content, sort of here's our poem that they've given us, and then it gives us some other information as well. So it tells us how many tokens we used. So in this case, a total of 192 tokens. So that's, I mean, going to be super cheap given cost of all that. So that's OpenAI. If I run the same query on Grok Llama, I'll just clear that. Don't really need to, but we'll see something interesting. That is so fast. That was 0.8 of a second. It is shockingly fast compared to anything else available. So it's interesting. They're running, but Grok is claiming that they're actually a hardware company. And they're saying they built some special purpose hardware that can run these models faster. And again, you can see we get quite similar kind of information. So actually, what they're saying is the completion time was 0.3 of a second. And then I guess the half a second would have been the network latency between me and their servers. And 300, yeah, so they've broken it down. Prompt time to process, total time, 0.38 of a second. Total tokens, 355. So that's really quite quick. Very, very impressive. And if I now run a local model, what you're going to see here is one of the trade-offs. The thing is that large language models consume an immense amount of computing power. So it'll be done in a fairly shortly, but you'll see in just a second. So that was 29,000 milliseconds, so 29 seconds to run the same process. And that was using the Llama 3 model. So that was using the same model as Grok. So Grok took, 0.8 of a second. My local model, 29 seconds. So that's like a big trade-off there. And
so what you're saying there is it's dependent on the hardware.
very much so. So my local model is running on a Mac Mini M1 SSD with 16 gigabytes of RAM. So it's not exactly a slouch, but obviously whatever Grok is doing. And there have been some people who are suggesting that what Grok is doing is throwing immense amounts of hardware at it and subsidizing the cost, trying to take market share from. So next question is, what does the code look like? And the reason I chose these three models is because it's quite interesting. That if I come here to I'll use the handy zoom in feature. So you can see the variable, the endpoint. It's talking api.openai.com, v1 chat completions. We've got my OpenAI key, which is the basically my lets me talk. And then we basically have our prompt, which we send as data. This was their example. So what I've done is I've just used the example they provide in their API documentation. And we built a JSON object that looks like that with the role. So we just use a native JSON functions to pass in our fields to create an object that looks like this. And that then is our payload. Then we set our curl options, our header, basically it's application JSON, the authorization header, and then we pass in our prompt as the data for our curl call. Then set a timer, and then we basically do our insert from URL, and we pass that to result. So, and then we just set our field with the results, and then the timer. So that's actually pretty simple. The interesting thing is, go to Grok. Grok have re-implemented the OpenAI API in their system. It is exactly the same code. The only difference is this points to api.grok.com instead of OpenAI. So you can change very, very easily between them. So, and then the authentication is different. The model name is different as well. So those are the only differences, kind of that. And this is my local model. And you're probably starting to see a pattern here. The only part that is different is my URL pointing to my local server. Otherwise, you see it's v1 chat completions. So the API, the local model that I've implemented, and I'll tell you how to install this in a moment, has implemented the OpenAI API as closely as they can, which is kind of cool. So there's really three ways. Sorry, let me rephrase that. There's a couple of ways you can implement an LLM locally. You can basically go to the trouble of writing your code in Python, like I've done in the other instance, which you probably don't want to do. Or there are two options that make it really, really easy. And they are, one of them is called Ollama. And it's an open source system. You can download it and install it. Ollama.com, you can basically download it. It's available for Mac, Linux, and then a preview version for Windows. You can also install it. So essentially, if I download it, it basically creates an app on my system. So you can see ollama.app. I've got that running here on my local Mac. I've also got it running on my server. So that's a really, really easy approach. And it gives you the ability to install a variety of different models. Llama 3 Phi. So Llama 3 is from Meta, from Facebook. Meta, yeah. Phi 3 is from Microsoft. And then we've got Mistral. Gemma is from Google. And then there's a number of other. You can see that some of these models are specifically aimed at things like code. So you can have specialized models that you can download. And Lava is a multimodal model. What that means is it can work with text, it can work with images, and kind of you can ask text questions about images or ask about images, and it will tell you what is in the image. Now, one of the things you'll see here is it says 8B or 70B. What that's referring to is the number of parameters in the model. If you're running it locally, you'll want to use an 8B or a 4B model, because to run a 70 billion parameter model, you need at least 64 gigabytes of RAM, which not everyone has on their PC. But the 8B models are still pretty impressive, what you can do with them. So Ollama is one option. And there's another option called LM Studio, which I've also got installed. And if I just move that onto screen, and this gives you a chat interface. And you can see that you can basically, again, these are the models that I've got installed for this one. One thing to note is that the models are all very, very large. To be honest, I've found my computer filling up with AI models quite rapidly. But if I give you an example with this one here, so it's just going to load the model. So let's see if I just want to ask a question back from my uni days. So it's basically now processing. And here we go. It's basically answering now. In this case, you can see that we've got information on the right-hand side here about the settings, and it does say you're a helpful coding AI assistant. But what you can do, and I'm asking a question about something else, but it's still pretty good about that. But we've got other settings here, for example, with the context length, how much text to generate. GPU settings is quite important. It's basically you want to use this with a GPU. Most AI models are optimized very heavily for NVIDIA GPUs, so they perform best on those. But a lot of them can also perform quite well on the Apple Metal GPUs that are in the M1, M2, and M3 chips. So you can see it's still chugging away, generating text. So, and I've got to say, one thing I found really, really handy is, frankly, for pair programming, basically, with this open, if there are certain areas where I've used it. I know Nikolai is a big fan of XML and XSLT, but like all sane people, I dislike it intensely. But I found that models like this are really, really good at answering questions about XSLT. If I give it the XML that I put in and the XML I want out, it will generally give me an XSLT that'll work first time. And that saves me a morning of having to faff around or having to ask Nikolai, one or the other. So there's a number of ways it's quite handy, and having it locally, I think, is quite good. So now it's worth pointing out that this LM Studio also provides an OpenAI compatible API. So if you want one or the other, Ollama doesn't really provide a GUI. Other people do provide a GUI for Ollama, but LM Studio has the GUI as well as the API. And if I open up iTerm and look at Ollama, basically you can see you can start it, you can create, you can show information for a model, run a model, pull a model from a registry. You can list the models. So if I say, so those are the models that I've got downloaded. And so you can see most of them do tend to run into the sort of several gigabytes, taking up a lot of space. The exception are sort of some of these are, like this one's a fairly specialized model that I downloaded for one particular reason I can't quite remember. Yeah, and so if I go back to FileMaker for a second, that if I want to see which models, that I can list which models I've got, which models I'm serving with Ollama, which is a little bit different. So that's just spoken to the API, come back, and given me a list of the models that it's currently serving, or that are available through the API. I could also, if I wanted to, pull a different model from this. So similarly, if I look at OpenAI, if I list the models, they've got an API function that'll tell me which models they support. And there's quite a lot of them. Down at the bottom, some of these ones here, you can see there's a flag. Is it a custom model? So these ones are models that I did fine tuning on. So those are available only to me and my account. They're not available to anywhere else because I specifically fine tuned them. So yeah, so like I said, I didn't have a presentation prepared, but I I think I've shown you, there's a couple of ways that you can run models locally. The amount of computing horsepower available is really, really important. As you can see by the performance on that. Now, the embedding models, like Cris talked about earlier, they're, as he said, they're derived from the large language models. And in fact, they're almost like the stage before the final stage of the embedding model. That they're giving you more information about the values and the different parameters that they're working on. So they're a lot quicker. To query an embedding model locally is very fast. If you do, say, 1,000 of them. So my image search here, the 25,000 images, to generate the embeddings for that took about 30 minutes. I was running that locally. I did not use a hosted embedding model, but it took about 30 minutes to populate all those embeddings locally when I initially populated the data. So,
So that's 30 minutes for about 25,000 records.
yeah, that was right. Yeah, about that. So I was doing about 1,000 a minute. So,
Because I think Cris sort of touched on this right before he disappeared, but I think one of the killer use cases of this is that there are tons of FileMaker databases with, you know, invoices or weight tickets or what have you in container fields. And I've been asked a bunch of times, hey, can I search what's in that document? And, you know, 20 minutes or 30 minutes for 25,000 records is totally doable. And even if you had an overnight batch process of all the stuff you generated during the day.
Exactly. Exactly. And one of the things here is that there's two parts to the process. Just want to show you here. There's the initial population of the embeddings. You only need to do that once. But then after that, then you can do your search. So what you'll need to do is then for your text, you'll get an embedding, but just for that one little bit of text. And then you do your similarity search in your whatever you're using for your vector database. So that's going to be fast. So that initial population is kind of, you can view that as a one-time data preparation thing, or when new data is coming into the system. So for some of the stuff I'm doing with videos, essentially what I'm doing is just basically dumping them in a folder. They then get processed. The embeddings get updated, and then they're searchable. So
it seems like, you know, just sort of, I think that sort of consensus right now, or at least a takeaway for the moment, is that your average desktop gear is going to be underpowered for these tasks. But, you know, stuff like Phi-3 and other small language models are coming out that are getting better and better and are equivalent to like ChatGPT-3 and stuff like that. And that, especially with like the M4s coming out later in the year and stuff like that, that the hardware moving up and the models moving down are going to meet where this will probably be pretty practical in 12 months.
Absolutely. There's one other really, really key thing, and that is that you need to bear in mind that Llama 3 and GPT-4 and the like, they're general purpose models. They're intended to basically deal with all this language. What some people are now doing are building smaller models. They've found ways to build smaller models that use the parts of those big models that they want, but they're very focused. So they may not be very good at some of the programming models, for example, that are getting smaller. They wouldn't be able to write a poem or you know, chat about Michael Porter's 5 forces model. However, the very focused question that if you ask them, what's the syntax of this Python function, they'd be really fast for that, that very focused task.
Optimized for Python.
Yeah. So, but also that you'll see models that are built specifically, potentially for specific business use cases that can deal with legal or medical, but would be totally useless for anything else. But one of the things that I found actually in my testing recently is that, and it's quite interesting, is that in FileMaker in search, we never had to worry about the quality of our search results. We know that if we search in a text field for a word, FileMaker is going to give us back the correct answer. If you're searching based on embeddings, there is no exact answer. So depending on the model you're using, your results may be quality of search results now is going to become a thing. Basically, and that's along several dimensions. So there's the speed, the performance. There's a question, did it return all the answers that it should have? Did it return everything that matched? That's another dimension. And not yet another dimension is, did it return things that didn't match? And there are a number of issues. And then we've got issues around, I think as you guys mentioned earlier, so like, the guardrails. Did it return things it really shouldn't have, like really bad stuff? So
did you read any of the disclaimers on the Fee 3? Microsoft is saying you could be getting some bad stuff coming back at you here. There are no guardrails on this thing.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see that. It's like, here's a stick of dynamite. I hope you use it for good and don't blow up your neighbor's house.
Well, to be honest, I think what they've done is I think that they put that in because I think they have built in guardrails, but they know that people are working quite hard to figure out ways around the guardrails. And because and it does seem that whatever guardrails people put in, other people do seem to work out ways of kind of getting around them.
Yes.
Sort of by stuffing the context window with results that are similar to what they want to see, to kind of trick and then putting their query at the end of that. There's a number of ways anyway. So sorry, I see this things in the chat. I'd not actually looked at that. Are there any were there any questions there that
I think it's mainly useful information, actually.
actually, yeah, from Heidi. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, that you can run it in Docker, and yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's yeah, there okay, if you've never heard of it, for models, Hugging Face is an open source repository of models. And for things like embedding models, they provide kind of a leaderboard along those different dimensions. What's the quality of search results provided by different embedding models? There's a lot of proprietary models, but there's also a lot of open source models. And so here's Hugging Face, and I can just remember where so if I click on that, oh yeah, some of the models from Meta, they're gated. They don't cost any money, but you do need to provide user information and get approved or not. Essentially, approval is going to be pretty much automatic, and it happens fairly quickly. I'm just going to see if I can find if this has a link to where the here we are, benchmarks. So they've got benchmarks out in general, they've got knowledge reasoning. Okay, actually, without searching around all over the website, I did have it handy, but I don't at the moment. So yeah, so are there any other questions? I mean, have people in general, have people tried playing around with the OpenAI and other APIs for this type of thing? I know Heidi and Cris have. Anybody else?
No, I'm just beginning to look at it. It looks fascinating. So I wanted to ask you what you saw as the benefits of having it on your own hardware. Is that security as well as
There would be security. A number of,
Sovereignty is what I'd call it, right? Data sovereignty.
yeah. One other thing is that actually, if you run it on your own hardware, there's probably you won't find yourself in a situation where a model becomes deprecated. Now, I know everything has changed very, very rapidly, but the code that I wrote a year ago to demonstrate in Berlin at .fmp, by the time I think within 4 months, a bunch of the code that I'd written would no longer work because the APIs had changed. Because a lot of the stuff is changing so rapidly. Now I think that's settled down. LangChain, which is one of the libraries that interacts with all these models, changed their APIs quite substantially. But I think they've now figured out what they want their APIs to look like, so they're settled down a lot. And the same with other sort of similar providers. So were there any questions?
And that's actually a point in favor of running the stuff locally as opposed to going out to the API. As if you have your own local deployment and the technology moves on you, you're not going to have your API calls broken. So you have at your own option when you want to choose to upgrade to maybe a newer version of the thing, and you can deploy on your own timetable as opposed to being at the whims of the API publisher.
It's kind of like a perpetual in a way. So the other two things, I've realized we have some overlap for .fmp, so I'm going to take some of this out. But the other things I had in my presentation for advantages of running local LLM are that you don't have to pay for the subscription, right? And those will probably come down in price. But also just you're not doing the API calls right out to the cloud. So that should be faster.
I should probably say
security wise, and then the security wise, you always have a risk of your data being leaked, right, when you go somewhere. But I'm trying to call it sovereignty because it's really about your data isn't going to somebody else. It's not about it being insecure because it goes up to the cloud. It's about it being kept private, or it goes up to OpenAI. It's about it being kept in-house private versus going up to OpenAI and whatever they might or might not do with it.
I should probably say that there's also a step that I probably should have shown here, but I didn't. And that's that some of these models you can actually run in AWS or Azure. So for corporates who are basically bought into like AWS or Azure or the Google Cloud, what they can do is run models in that environment. So it's kind of a halfway house between having it on your own hardware. One of the questions I think though is getting access to GPUs, which you really need. And GPUs are expensive. They can be surprisingly expensive.
So I would still call that, see, when you rent a virtual private server, you're running instances on AWS or Google Cloud or whatever, I would still call, if you're running a model in your environment versus sending it to Anthropic or OpenAI, I would still call that local if you were running it just within your setup, right? Would you?
Oh, you mean sort of if you're running it, say, in your VPC, like sort of your
if
AWS
you're running it,
I would
government and all
I would
those
consider that I would consider that effectively local.
It's so it's not local kept on premise, but it's local within your VPC.
Within your it's in an environment that you've got the tool set that you can secure it.
Exactly, because like government has like government cloud on AWS, and I'm sure anything they run is considered, local to them in their little cloud. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, most corporates basically seem to view that as local.
Same
That's
thing.
kind of like the,
Yeah. But it's interesting. I never really thought about the terminology. Yeah.
No, that's
It's like I think the CompTIA uses the term private cloud. So you have a private cloud, and so if you run an LLM within your private cloud, that's still a local LLM to your private cloud versus going out to OpenAI or Anthropic or something.
it's in your walled garden.
Yes, your walled garden. Yeah.
I should actually, Heidi, also point out this isn't my .fmp presentation. So in terms of local models, don't worry about.
It's okay. I have too much, so I can.
Okay.
I was going to show a little bit of RAG in my Olama, and you're not showing that. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
So Ian, I was going to ask you what the performance like using AWS or something like that. Is it somewhere between local hardware and using?
That's a good question. It probably is how much it depends on how much you're willing to pay them.
Yeah.
That's actually, now, interestingly enough, for training models, you can get a free GPU instance from Google in some of their Python workbooks. You can, which is interesting. Now, because it's free, it's the smallest GPU that you can imagine, and training models still takes a tremendous amount of time. And they basically it's caveated that, like, this thing may be switched off at any moment. And if you do use it, leave it running and try to use it for production, they're onto that kind of stuff. But it's for a certain amount of stuff, it does get you somewhere. Let me just see if I've got one handy. Yeah, so Google Colab notebooks like this, basically, where you can see where you've got Python code in a notebook that you can run. And here you can see where it says connect to a hosted runtime. And that is it. That's actually a GPU in this case. Obviously, they'll give you a much better. So they're not going to give you an A100 free. But because those are very expensive. But the T4. So if you're training a certain amount of stuff, it's quite good. I won't get into training models here because it's like a whole different can of worms, and it's much more akin to a research project than a software development project. But you can format the information necessary from FileMaker and use that to populate things. So that's kind of cool. So anyway, sorry, this has been a bit rambling and all over. So
no, it's fascinating. It's really thought-provoking.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone's got any other questions. So Sam's asked, which vector B would you suggest to get started? Okay, well, everybody is implementing vector databases at the moment. And if you look at the FileMaker product backlog, you might get a clue. So I might suggest just waiting a bit. But Pinecone is a hosted vector database that will scale very, very big and very fast. Everything's accessed via an API. It doesn't do the embeddings, but it does all the search. If you use PostgreSQL has vector embedding extensions, so you can do vector search from Postgres, and that is what That is what this is using behind the scenes. And if I just go over here, get that out of the way. That was running on a Postgres instance in Docker locally on my M1 Mac. And with that number of things, my understanding from people who've run more data, they said Postgres is fine up to like 1 million records or so. And a couple of people have said it's fine just beyond that. So Postgres, yeah. MongoDB has also added vector search. So yeah, any other questions?
Sam, were you about to jump in with a question there? Thought I saw you flicker up for an instant.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. Do you have any examples on how to embed the data? Using API or
yeah, what you do is basically you call an API, and do I have, because my give me my .fmp presentation last year. What I did was I embedded all from FileMaker. I basically generated embeddings by calling. I used the OpenAI API to generate embeddings. And actually, if I just find actually Ollama shows an example here because Ollama support embeddings. There we are. This is what the curl call looks like to generate an embedding in Ollama. So it's going to be pretty much the same call in OpenAI. Yeah, so basically you call the host /API embeddings, and then as data, you pass which embedding model you want to use and the prompt. And then it hands back an embedding. This is what an embedding will look like, although it's going to have many more dimensions than that, sort of probably over 1,000 dimensions or 1,000 elements in the array. So generating an embedding is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
So once it's been generated, then that gets sent to a vector database and stored in the vector database. Which in the case of PostgreSQL, the query would look like, if you can deal with Python, hang on, somewhere here. We're matching embeddings. Yeah, it essentially is an insert statement in Postgres once you've got the embedding. So so there's that. And with things like Pinecone, it's an API call to add to to their database. So
okay, so only other write the Python code to handle
sorry, in this case I've used Python as an example, but from FileMaker you could issue an insert from a URL with a curl statement like this to get the embedding. And then it would be another, if you were using Pinecone or one of the hosted ones, it would be another API call.
So one more question. So how to use the embedding So if you just, for example, I do one more API call to the model to get the answer based on the prompt. The model will use the embedding automatically, or I have to do something else.
You would it depends which vector database you're using. With one of the ones that's called via an API, there would be an API call to search. And sorry, I'm just going to have a quick look. If I can find my .fmp demo from last year, I've got FileMaker code that shows how to do this. I just need to find it. And I think I've got it handy. I hope I've got it handy. Sorry for this. Last year was 2023. I appear to have everything there except for FileMaker file, so it may be on my server. So I'm just going to check. Where's my server there? Okay, this isn't going to work because the API keys that I used are I deleted from the servers. But here's a FileMaker script that gets an embedding. So this is getting this is getting the embedding from OpenAI. Well, I set their endpoint as a custom function. So this is what the OpenAI embedding endpoint looks like. So we curl to that. And you can see that I've also got for Pinecone to query, the endpoint to query, which I pasted all the documentation in here as well. But this is the, so basically what it does is it connects to, and then my project and environment. And then the query actually looks like that. And this is what you would pass in. You pass in the data as a vector. Top K is how many results do you want to get from your thing? And then include values is going to give you some of the metadata that's along with that if you want. So so fundamental process would be we would get the embedding of the text we want to query or question. We embed that, and then we pass that to the end, this query endpoint, and it gives us back a JSON object that looks like this. Now their API has changed somewhat since then, but the process is basically the same. And then to insert or upsert information into Pinecone is like this, that you basically passed in the vectors with the ID and the values, and that updates the database. And there's likely to be a much simpler way of doing this in the near future without needing to worry about Pinecone or other databases. Yeah, does
Thank
that?
you very much.
Oh, okay. So I probably should have thought to actually get this presentation on the screen beforehand, but I didn't. Anyway,
no, I think it's been excellent, Ian. I think there's a lot of thought-provoking stuff in there. It's really useful to see some of the nitty-gritty about how you're going about some of this stuff.
yeah, I did a I think I showed this before, but what I did was I took my data set was the speakers for .fmp last year, where I basically just took screenshots of them, then used grabbed the text from the image,
Yeah,
And yeah. So okay.
Hey.
If there's no other questions, then that's it. Thanks very much for listening.
people
Those of
have-
you who have not driven away.
I think a few have drifted away at the end there. But I think everyone made it pretty much to the end there. That's great. Yeah, thank you so much for presenting that. That's
Very welcome.
and talking about it. I mean, this is really a conversation at this stage, isn't it? For a lot of people, and just provoking them into thinking, certainly me, into thinking about where we can go with it and where it's headed.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to have that knowledge, and lots of respect to you for doing it.
Oh, no, I'm finding it fascinating. I just love learning all this new stuff. It's just great.
Yeah. I think we're down to, what are we down to? We're down to just a few people here. Tobias, do you want to, sorry, Ian.
No problem.
Thanks. Tobias, do you want to talk about your EAB model, or do you want to hold it over to the next meeting?
Well, I could just have a few minutes of it now, and we'll see about later. Maybe I have more of a presentation at that point, possibly, because now it's not too much to present.
It's in its initial stages, so yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. So if
far away.
Yeah. So let me share the screen, maybe. Let's see. So triple-based data model is another name for it. What I'm working on right now, and what EAV model has in common with other types of models are the triple thing. So triple based. And the RDF, for example, Resource Description Framework, also has this structure of three position, like the most tiny bit of information has three parts in it. And there's another database, I don't know if you've heard about it, it's called Datomic, from the same guy that makes the Clojure, the programming language.
No, that was a new one, I mean.
Yeah, and then and then maybe there's a guy, he's retired now, but a few years ago I kind of stumbled upon his model on the internet, and his name is Simon Williams, and that's the associative model of data. Has anyone heard of that?
So where are you going with this, Tobias? Lost your sound.
Oh, you're muted, Tobias.
There was some kind of connection problem. Did you? I don't know what you heard or not heard now, but
we heard nothing. We heard nothing since the associative model,
which I don't think any of us had heard of.
which I don't. Yeah, none of us had heard about.
I see. So another comparison would be to the key value pair thing, which if you include what the key value pair is pointing to, so to speak, to the entity that it describes, then you have that three-part unit once again. So there are a few reference to draw from concerning this triple-based data model. So yeah. So my goal is pretty high. It's to construct a general, flexible, and fully reusable data model to be used with any system, and it doesn't seem to that hard to reach. So I have just a quick, really simple example to show here. And the first example to the left is it represents the usual common standard way of doing it, and the table looks like this. So this is really.
We're not seeing your screen at the moment.
What's happening?
I think when you had your temporary blip, it probably lost the screen connection.
Okay, because it says I'm sharing here, but let me share.
I'm doing it again. Yeah, now we got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So to the left is the common standard, the usual way to do it with one table and with all the attributes implemented as fields, right? Not so much exciting stuff there, but so I made the thing to the right, the layout, the window to the right is also to show that the UI could be identical to the layout, which is based on the non-triple data model, right? So the first thing, so this is a three-step process. You start with the standard version of the data model, and what is done in the second step is that attributes are not represented as fields anymore. They are kind of moved to records, which means that you have this model with three tables. And what is done in the EAV table is that you so first of all, let me say that you have an table, I'll show you, where you, instead of having the attributes as local fields, you have them as records. So you have one record per attribute, right? And then what you do is that you have a connecting join table, which is the EAV table, which connects the entity, which is the person, and attribute from the separate table. And for now, the value is not in the separate table. It's hard-coded into the entity attribute value join table, but that's of minor importance. So what is going on here is that I have portals for each attribute, and the portal is to the EAV table, and it's filtered to only show the records with the attribute ID 3 or 5 or anything, which corresponds to certain attributes here, the date of birth and the gender and the height and nationality. Are you following me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So what I'm aiming for is to go to the third step, which is having after you have moved, so to speak, moved the attributes from fields to records, then the next thing is to gather all the entity types, all the entities with different types into one single table.
Mhm.
So that which is represented by this layout here. So one could decide that certain attributes are of higher importance, and then you can have those filtered single record portals, which looks like local fields, and then you can have this is just one way of solving the UI, and above those main attributes, you can have a portal where you can choose any additional attributes. And one more thing about the second stage and the third stage is that when you create a new person, you have to add those records in the EAV table, the join table, for the default attributes that is going to appear on in those one record filtered portals. So yeah, that's about it. And I was wondering, has anyone been into something like this that could remind of this?
Not really. Are you seeing the advantage of this as being portability to other systems, or more synchronicity with other systems?
No. What I am aiming for is to have a data model that could fit any system.
So you're trying to be okay.
So one could have plenty of constructs, or I mean, to have a UI that is anything. I mean, have lots of variability, but on top of a data model that is so general and flexible enough that it could house any system. That's the goal.
I don't know. It seems to me like there's quite a lot of maybe quite a lot of work involved in doing that. I get the theory, I get the principle. Wondering about the practicality of it.
Yeah. The practicality is, it's that I talked about, that I mentioned, to have not being forced to redo similar solutions and have one system
do everything
for everything, and then you could, I mean,
it's an interesting idea. Anyone else got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I did work on a system where a couple of tables moved a bit in this direction. It was a situation where the client presented us with a system that had I think it was over 1,000 fields in one table.
Yeah.
And the thing is, all these fields were essentially just minor variants of each other. It was so we did look at trying to do something along not fully this, but sort of moving a bit. The thing we found was reporting seemed like it was going to be very, very difficult.
Mm.
And yeah, the client was not massively thrilled with with the change in approach. I'll just leave it at that.
Ah.
It, I mean, yeah, it's a different kind of mindset, but it, from the perspective of, it looked like it would have been able to greatly, yeah, improve the structure of the data and put it into some kind of sensible approach. But I think that I felt like the reporting was looking like it was going to be tricky.
So I mean, I'm trying to experiment with this, and so I will go all in having no attribute, no fields in the local tables. That's just to try it fully. But I can think of a situation where you have a hybrid, where you have certain attributes as fields and others as this soft-coded as records, attributes as records instead. So you could combine the standard model with this soft-coded one. Yeah,
I think it's fascinating. It's definitely will take a bit of thinking about, but yeah, it is interesting. I mean, off the top of my head, someone just showed me a mapping system for a warehouse they had. It just would have suited a different model better. Maybe your model would have suited that better. They ended up with a table with, I don't know, 1,000 fields in it. So if the whole structure had been based on this in the first place, maybe it would have been better. And I know it's not your aim, but if you're porting that to something else, you have to integrate with something else, another system. You do have more flexibility by not having static field names.
Yeah,
that is an advantage. As to whether you can build one system for everything, it's a harder question. I don't know.
Yeah, to build something totally generalized like that sounds like it would be an awful lot of work.
Why?
I guess one of my questions would be why FileMaker for an approach like this? Is it the most suited for that type of thing?
No, it's not, I guess. So it kind of really stretches the limits of the relational model, because you're inside an environment.
Mm-hmm.
The relational model is the model, and then you kind of don't want to use it in a way. So one of my ideas is that since everything will be put in the entities table and this join table, entity attribute value will be potentially a huge amount of records. So it might be wise to put that data inside another database than FileMaker.
How would you deal with things like with the data? How would you deal with things like indexing? Because if you'd want to avoid ending up with people sticking large chunks of big chunks of text in there.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I mean, that triple table, which has a foreign key field to the entity table, a foreign key field to the attribute table, and then a foreign key field to the value table. So, I mean, that's three separate tables that then are connected through foreign keys into this central hub kind of table, the AV table. So I guess one could have, I mean, I don't know, maybe a separate file for those three tables, but that's not really an answer to your question about indexing. Another idea is to have a cache, like one field in the AV table, which has a JSON that could cache the data from those three separate entity attribute value tables, which might solve performance issues. But
Yeah, I thought I'd had that thought actually as well.
mm,
Seems almost obvious in a way.
yeah, okay.
Hmm.
That was it for me.
Okay. Well, thanks for
Okay,
bringing it.
interesting.
Maybe we'll talk about it again next meeting. If you've got further with it, let me know.
Yeah. Could be, yeah.
I'm going to turn the recording off now. And say thank you to everybody for coming and for presenting and talking and giving of your time. We're welcome to carry on afterwards if people want to. I'm going to have to go fairly soon, but I can leave the recording on if people want to talk longer. Not the recording, the meeting open. I'm just going to stop.